All right, well, for my talk this morning, we're going to continue with the theme of an anti-fragile intellect, and we're looking at an anti-fragile intellect from the context, really, of the average college student. As we talked about last night, if you were with us, and if not, just a little bit of review for you. Many of us are aware that the statistics are terrible for students who grow up in church, who identify as Christians early, have a conversion experience, give their lives to Jesus, fill in the blank, however you want to say that. And then when they go off to college, the statistics are terrible for those students to actually follow through and come out the other side just as much Christian as they went in. So it would seem there's something fragile about that generation. And as a guy that is teaching as an adjunct in a local university, I can tell you that the fragility, it happens to be in the mind. It's in the intellect. And very often the student is unprepared for what are very often simple yet harsh attacks on the intellect of Christianity, and they'll give up right away. It doesn't take much. And again, the statistics tell us that often these fallings away take place often within the first semester of college. I've seen it, as I told you last night, happen within one class. It's shocking to me, but I hope I never get over the shock and awe of that. I hope it never stops bothering me. So last night we talked about some of the we talked about the wolves that students kind of bring with them to college, and I mixed all kinds of metaphors so for those of you with strong English backgrounds, I am truly sorry. But it's like math. I just don't get it, so I make stuff up. This morning, I'm going to look at the same kind of idea, but instead of these deficiencies in the form of wolves, I'm going to talk about what students bring with them in mindset to the college. That they grow up, and so some of these mental commitments that they have when they arrive at college, and how that affects them, and what we can do about it. I do want to remind you that I do have a ministry called Addison's Walk, so this is my shameless plug, just to let you know. If in your churches or ministries or what have you, if I could be of service to you, there are seminars and talks that I could come and give, and if you're interested in those, just please let me know. Afterward, we can talk about it. Well, if you have a social media account, you have already heard it all before. Particularly if you've been active on social media in the past 9 months to a year. You will see and I'm not just picking on young people, college students or high school students, but across the board, across the spectrum of age, you will see leveled against us and things that pop up on our feeds where people will declare, I have a belief that, fill in the blank. And it could be something that perhaps you agree with, like, I believe that God loves me. Well, that's actually a wonderful thing to believe, and you'd happen to be right, but not just because you believe it. Or you might see something like, well, I really don't believe in God, I believe in the flying spaghetti monster, which is an actual thing. I don't quite get it. They're called Pastafarians, by the way, those who believe in the flying spaghetti monster. They wear colanders on their heads. It's really quite amazing. But they could put things on social media about stuff that they believe, and if you just try to challenge, okay, but why do you believe it's true? Well, I don't need to tell you why, because I just believe it deep down in my heart. And who are you to tell me that I can't believe something? Frankly, I identify as a Christian. I mean, I hope that's kind of obvious to you. I follow the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. He is my hope, and He has my allegiance. But I've been told by fellow Christians that I should really not try to persuade anyone, because that's just wrong-headed. You can't do that. And if that's the case, then what does faith then become? Well, this is a bit of a rhetorical question. You don't need to answer out loud, but is believing in something, particularly like believing in God, in Orthodox Christianity, is that personal? This is not a trick question. Yes, of course it is personal. But is it private? No. In fact, a simple reading of the New Testament will tell you straight up Christianity is not a solo sport. In fact, it's a full contact team sport, in case you're wondering. And then, again, if you just dig in and read a few of these other things to see, well, where are you coming from these things, you will find out that often these ideas are either being generated mostly from existential experience or some kind of experiment, some kind of empirical experiment. This is the only place where these ideas come from, and so they're coalescing and they're moving back and forth. We're going to talk about three areas this morning. They're not in silos specifically, so it's a little bit messy. There is, of course, overlap in the world of ideas, in the world of thinking, but I do want to try to share with you where I think the average college student is beginning their journey with the mental commitments that they already have, and it is possible that there are many in our churches who also share these mental commitments. They just don't realize it. And they're dangerous. Not dangerous in, we might learn something new, and I might actually get to read something that I disagree with. No, I actually encourage that. I really do. But I'm talking about the danger of deadening an alive faith or beating it down over and over again that just is eventually going to lead to saying, I just give up. Back in the end of February, beginning of March, my social media started blowing up because two very popular YouTube personalities that have a show, their names are Rhett and Link. They have over 25 million YouTube followers across a few different channels. I bet it's gone up since I figured out those numbers back in March. But these guys, who are former Campus Crusade missionaries out of North Carolina State, now living in California, very publicly renounced their faith. And you may think, well, it's not a big deal. In fact, they probably were never Christians to begin with. Maybe. I don't know. But I happen to think that is a big deal because they're just a couple years younger than me. And these are the older, cooler Gen X guys, like the older Gen X brothers, who are giving a nod of assent to an entire generation to say, yeah, you can just give up on everything because you just can't know. Nothing really matters. By the way, I watched 11 hours of their YouTube channel and some other things where they were interviewed, and it's entirely heartbreaking. And they captured so many of the things that I want to talk about this morning. As we get there, I just want to share with you some students' quotes. These are direct quotes from papers. I told you last night that I don't do exams because it's just too easy. And believe me, I don't do papers because it's easy on me. I hate grading papers. Dr. Arp, do you like grading papers? He probably does, because he's a lot smarter than I am. I'm like, no, I hate it. So I make them really short. But just in case you're wondering, Andy, what is your credential for knowing this stuff? I have graded well over 4,000 theology and philosophy essays. There's a level of purgatory where that's involved. Perhaps even a circle of Dante's hell. I'm not sure, but it's really awful. And I didn't begin assigning short critical reflection papers for the reason that I ended up using them. But in God's sovereignty, what I discovered is students tell me what they think. They tell me what they believe. Now, I set the table in my classroom so that I really encourage them to tell me what they believe, not what they think I want to hear. But I really want to hear from them. And so here are some of the things that they've said. Often in an intro to philosophy paper, and the first paper they write for me is the equivalent of what did I do with my summer vacation. It's nearly impossible to fail, although it happens. And they'll write things in answering a simple question. The prompt is, do we need philosophy in the 21st century? Yes or no? And the students that actually are brave enough to believe me that they don't have to answer the way I think they want them to will say, well, not really, because we have all these wonderful questions, but there are no answers. And it's all about the question. Or, as I discussed last night, it's all about the journey. It is not all about the journey. Is the journey part of it? Of course. But for those who are followers of Jesus Christ, is it about the destination? Any question that science cannot answer is not worth asking. I want you to think about that for a minute. Any question that science cannot answer is not worth asking. I want to tell you specifically about this particular student. This was a young lady in a theology class that I was teaching. She sat in the front. She showed up all the time. I'm going to say her name is Rachel. That is not her real name. And she would come to class. She would participate. She'd kind of like twirl her hair and look at her split ends the whole time. You know, I'm used to that. That happens. Can't, win them all. But she'd come to class, and I actually make attendance a little bit a part of their grade. I'm not entirely sure what the university's attendance policy is. I should probably look that up, but I don't really know. So I make it a little bit part of their grade just to give them a little bit more incentive to be there, other than just hearing wonderful dad jokes for an hour and a half twice a week. And she was there all the time. And I also told them, I know things come up. You're going to have to miss class from time to time, but just be here. The more you're here, the more I see your face, the better it is for you. Right? Well, a few days before Thanksgiving break, this one particular semester, this student came to me and she said, Andy, I just wanted to let you know, and I hope it's okay, I'm going to go home early, a few days early for Thanksgiving break. Oh, okay. And it's not really a big deal, particularly a student who's had perfect attendance for 2.5 months, right? No big deal. And I said, yeah, okay. And she said, well, yeah, because my siblings and I, we're all going to gather at our home because my mom is sick and we just want to spend time with her. Now, I assume she's telling me the truth. I mean, she could be lying to me, but, frankly, they're not going to do that. I said, well, sick, is this a big deal? She said, well, yeah, she has cancer. Yeah, she has a cold. Or, yeah, she threw her back out. But just matter of factly, she has cancer. And I said, well, it's cancer serious, but, I mean, is this like life and death right now? No. She just has good days and bad days, and she's having a bad day right now. Okay. Well, of course. How can I pray for you? Oh, no, that's okay. Okay. And I know she's telling me the truth about all of it, because that Monday after Thanksgiving, I got an email from her dean telling me that her mom passed away. And I don't know if she didn't know if it was that serious, or she's just trying to protect me emotionally and at the same time protect her. To this day, I don't know. And I want to tell you right now, the story doesn't end well. So I sent her an email, and I told her I was praying for her, asking if I can do something to help. And she wrote me a very polite email back and said, no, we're doing okay. And I said, look, take as much time as you can. I'll work with you. Don't let this class be a burden. I will help you. I'm a philosopher, but I'm not an ogre. And I was shocked that she came back very quickly. So I gave it a day or two, and I was able to get Rachel after class, and I started using all those youth ministry skills that I'd wondered for years, why am I doing this? And it was, in these instances, God reminds me, it's for such a time as this, Andy. So I got around to asking basically this question of her, because now it matters. I didn't beat her over the head with that paper. I didn't make her feel bad about this question, but I did want to see, what do you really think? And it's the same answer. If science cannot answer the question, it's not worth asking. I want you to think of the ramifications of that in that young lady's life. That ought to break your heart. Only in evil can we experience God's love. That's one of my favorites. I'm told over and over again that we have to have evil in order to know good. Or there is no right or wrong belief system. In fact, very often in my ethics classes, students will tell me that to claim an objective standard for morality is itself immoral. I can't even, but that's what they tell me. I'm just not sure how that works. And then lastly, faith equals, they'll tell me what they think faith means. It means a belief or a strong feeling. Again, these are the things reinforced by that great house of theology, Disney. This is the stuff that comes out all the time that's in popular media. So we're going to understand and defeat, I hope today, the three-headed beast, the Kerberos, the three-headed wolf dog thing in mythical Greek myth that guards the gates of Tartarus, the underworld. So I'm going to borrow the language from my Reformed cousins as we talk about these three key areas. I have a friend that I taught with at Marywood. His name is John DePoe, and he gets credit for coming up with these categories. But here they are. First one is sola tolerantia. So if you have any familiarity with the Protestant Reformation, you know their leaders, they use these mnemonic devices, the sole, which is plural for sola, to help folks within that movement remember what it was all about. So I think these are so important to the emerging generation that they are indeed their own sole. So the first is sola tolerantia, which means all ideas are equal and valid. So what I'm saying to you is that these three, the average student comes to my classroom and the classrooms in your town, and your high school students are already thinking like this, and you might say, wait, even the ones in my youth group? Oh yes. Not explicitly perhaps, but it is implicitly there, and it doesn't take much just to break loose and go full on with this stuff. And we're going to talk about the implications here in a second. So the first one is sola tolerantia. So you see the word tolerance right in that phrase, do you not? All ideas are equal and valid. Number two, that's my favorite. Look at that graphic. Isn't that glorious? Sola secreto fidem. All issues of faith are private and personal. Secret faith. Secreto fidem. That's all that means. Sola secreto fidem. All issues of faith are private and personal. If you ever have the courage within you to watch a daytime talk show like The View, you will see this idea come up over and over. It's okay if you have beliefs, just keep them to yourself where it's private and they can't hurt anybody. So this is everywhere. And lastly, sola experientia. Now this has got a little bit longer definition than what's on the screen, so let me give it to you. Sola experientia basically means this. Knowledge, and then in parentheses or brackets, knowledge, if available at all, which is a qualifier that's important to understand. Knowledge, if available at all, true knowledge, actually claiming knowledge of something, is only possible through the lens of either experience or experiment. So either existential experience, we are having an existential experience now. And by existential, I don't mean, oh, I'm so angsty, I don't really know. No, that's not what I mean. I mean, we're all here, we're in the now, right now, this moment. Right? So if in the news you hear about an existential crisis, that means a crisis right now. Not that's going to happen now, that has happened, but right now. So we are having the same experience. Or empirical experiment, or if you want to think, for those of you who are really film aficionados and you're kind of snooty about your films, those of you who only watch excellent films, something like Nacho Libre. Thank you. And Nacho's little buddy there, Esteban, when he says, I only believe in science. Well, that's the second half of this. All right, so what we're going to do in the time that I have is we're going to walk through these things and just talk about some implications. And if we have time, at the end, I do want to share just some simple strategies to begin thinking about it. But I want to identify the problem clearly and carefully instead of going straight to application. I hope that's okay with you. You can't stop me, so that's what we're going to do. All right, so all ideas are equal and valid. What does that entail? What does that mean? Well, basically it means that no one really wants to ever take a position on anything. in a book that was published in 1986 called The Closing of the American Mind. If you would like to read a book that it influenced me and how I think about this generation, that was one of them. So nearly 35 years ago. So, it was basically written on stone tablets. How old is that, right? So 35 years ago, by Alan Bloom, a brilliant scholar, he's the one that I learned this idea about no book from 35 years ago, and has not gotten any better, that we talked about last night. But he also said that he discovered in his students in the mid-'80s that for them the cardinal sin was actually claiming moral knowledge on any metaphysical reality. So very simply, that sounds like a big philosophy word that may not be able to understand. It's really not that hard. Anything that's metaphysical is talking about something real that is not material. So if I were to say, do you believe in love? Well, yes, I would hope all of you would say that. Well, can you go to Walmart and buy a pound of love thinly sliced? No, because it has no physical properties. It is something real that is not material. So if we were to talk about the soul, God, these are all metaphysical things. So to actually claim knowledge on something metaphysical, they would consider to be immoral. And I just explained that a little bit because there is no empirical experiment that you can use to prove that love exists. It has no physical properties. So this is where the idea of the new tolerance comes in. And it's really a word that should have air quotes around it, because tolerance is anything but tolerant. Tolerance means I'm willing to look at your worldview, your belief, your grid of processing reality, as long as we keep it to the level of comparison, never contrast. I just saw someone, sorry, my Swiss cheese memory can't bring up the name, came across one of my feeds the other day, a well-known pastor, and he said, the problem with pastors today is that none of them are hated. I went, oh, you have my attention now. What does that mean? Meaning, they are all about being nice and being comfortable, but they're rarely willing to say things that might tick someone off. Like, I'm sorry, but in the name of Jesus, you're wrong. You see, the new tolerance says, I accept you, and it's cool that we can all believe what we want, as long as you keep it to the level of comparison and never contrast. Let me give you a biblical example of how that doesn't work. In Acts chapter 17, perhaps one of my favorite passages, and by the way, I'm not sure how God feels about us having life verses or famous passages. If all Scripture is God-breathed, I don't know. Hashtag philosopher props. It's just something I think about. But if I'm allowed to, Acts 17 is kind of my go-to passage. And you have Paul on a layover in Athens, waiting for his buddies. There's no church. He goes to the synagogue, talks to the Jews there, then finds some God-fearing Greeks. He goes to the Walmart of the day, the Agora, right, which is great, just like our Walmart, where a place you can go buy a shirt, a car battery, and go to Subway. So, in Paul's day, it's a new toga, a camel blanket, and a gyro, I guess. I don't know. But he goes to the marketplace, and he's having conversations with the people there, talking about the resurrection. And a group of philosophers, Epicurean and Stoics, who, by the way, are among us today, said, what is this all about? So they bring him to the equivalent to the modern-day faculty lounge, and it's called the Areopagus, where anyone would try out new ideas. And Paul stands up, and he says, Men of Athens, I see in every way you're very religious. And for those of you who are biblically literate, you know what comes next. He did not say, Men of Athens, I've seen everywhere you're very religious. And that's so wonderful that you have a crutch that you can lean on. And, I'm spiritual, you're spiritual. Well, you Epicureans, you're kind of just the party animals, toga. But you started off a little okay. And you Stoics, man, you're just in balance. And I think that's cool. No, he said, men of Athens, I perceive in every way you're very religious. In fact, I see that you try so hard that you even have a monument to the unknown God. What you have worshipped in ignorance, today I will declare to you. Oh yeah. That kind of language, 400 years prior to that, got a philosopher named Socrates sentenced to death. To dare contrast in the world of ideas. And then there's the idea of what's true for you is not necessarily true for me. It would not surprise me if there are some in this room, I know I have done it, where to save face or to save a relationship, to just walk away and not get in a complete fist fight with someone, I'll say, instead of saying, well, we're going to have to agree to disagree, that's okay to say. But say, well, what's true for me is clearly not true for you, that's abject nonsense. Truth doesn't change. True is true. And I tell my students, if you think that that's actually real and you really want to live consistently, I dare you to try that same philosophy with your checking accounts. Go ahead. Suddenly 2 + 2 is no longer 4. And you can create your own formula. See how your bank responds to that. I bet that's not going to go well. And then we are seeing now the idea of safe zones. I hate that phrase. I hate it. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm not trying to be too controversial on purpose, but I'm going to tell you that this concept has been eking its way into our churches, and it needs to be stopped. We don't serve in safe zones. Our goal, our priority is not to be safe. Maybe it's to be a little bit dangerous. Certainly not safe. But this idea that I can't listen to things that are going to be disagreeable to me. On the first or second day of my classes, I give a speech about this, and I tell them, and this is going to get me in trouble someday, I say, I actually hate the phrase safe zone, and we're not going to use it, or safe space, and we're not going to use it in this classroom. I do, however, like the word sanctuary. And I think it would do well for us to maybe adopt that mindset instead of a safe space or safe zone mindset, because in a sanctuary you are free to ask questions where you should expect an answer, even if it's something that you disagree with. So I use this little phrase with my students. I say, you are in my sanctuary. I've declared this space sanctuary, and you are under the protection of the warrior monk. That is me. For the hour and a half that you are in here, you are free to ask any question you want, as long as you're not trying to be disrespectful or hurt my feelings. I mean, if you're trying, probably you'll succeed. But you can ask any questions. And I want to tell you, sometimes, not every day, these 18 and 19-year-olds, for the first time, maybe realize, oh, I can ask a question about the fabric of reality perhaps I've never thought of before. And Giessman's going to shoot straight with me. Because the university classroom is one of 2 places on the planet that should actually be sanctuary. You know where the other place is. Our churches. Let me give you just a real simple yet fun illustration of how all ideas are equal and valid, except for when they're not, works out. I used to attend a philosophy discussion group here in the area. I went for several months, a number of years ago. I stopped going because no matter what the topic was being discussed, it always ended up with, and that's why Christians are the stupidest people on the planet. And I couldn't really do anything about it, and so I came to the conclusion that it would be best for me to not go and just pray for those people. So sometimes wisdom is the better part of valor. because it just wouldn't go. But one of the last times I attended, they decided what they were going to talk about, and they were very democratic, very free, very liberal about it. They passed around a hat, and everybody would put in a topic that they want to talk about, and the person overseeing this discussion, he would pull out one, and we'd get to vote on it. Yes. So one of the questions that was in there was something having to do with, are there objective moral duties and values, which falls under the category of sola tolerantia? Because if all ideas are equal and valid, the answer necessarily is no. Because objective means yes or no and nowhere in between. It's really quite binary. It's off or on. Are you with me? So if that's the case, it has to be no. So, they're going to, we're going for it. So, me being the knuckle-dragging youth ministry Christian in the room, I'm arguing for objective moral duties and values. And they're like, because God says so? I'm like, no, because actually the essence of God is goodness. If there's a moral law, it would imply a moral lawgiver. So, I'm arguing for that. And I'm sitting next to a young lady that is the textbook definition of angry atheist. Now, you've all met an angry fundamentalist. It wouldn't surprise me. Those are the people who try to beat Jesus into you with a 40-pound Thompson Chain Reference Bible. Okay? She's the opposite. She's an angry atheist. And she is just beside herself, going over and over again, ain't no God going to tell me what to do kind of thing. So I'm trying to figure out, and I'm trying to tell her, but you're saying that right and wrong is totally subjective. And she's saying, there cannot be an objective standard. It is totally up to every individual. And I kept saying, there's no way you would consistently live like that. There's absolutely no way for this tolerance idea that you are espousing. And she would not give up. And I'm thinking, now, how am I going to actually help her understand this? So what I'm about to tell you really happened. Please do not follow my example. Don't do what I did. So I looked down, and her right foot is about 18 inches from my left foot, and between our feet is her purse. So because I'm a Christian and I do believe that God hears my prayers, I offered a simple prayer: "Oh God, let her see me before this goes too far." That was my prayer. And I very deliberately slid her purse over in front of me, and it's just a simple leather satchel with a banana-shaped zipper across the top, and I very deliberately, and I am not making this up, I began to unzip her purse a couple set of teeth at a time. Now, gentlemen, I don't know about you, but I get great anxiety as I'm ready to go out the door because I don't have much to take care of. And I'm waiting for my bride to come downstairs, and that call comes from above. "Honey, would you get my phone?" Oh, no. "Where is it?" "It's in my purse." "No." Because I don't want to go in there, because it's just, I get lost. And I'm like, "Well, where is it?" "Well, it's in the front pocket." But there's no front or back. I mean, honestly. So I only go in there with repelling gear, safety blanket, rescue flares. I don't know if I'm ever coming back. So, and you'd never touch a stranger's purse. So this is really dangerous territory. So I'm about 3/4 of an inch in. It's dark. Mercifully, I can't see anything, and I'm trying not to look anyway. I'm like, "Oh, please. See what? Look at what I'm doing." And so she sees me, and I can't give you a direct quote, but she wanted to know what in the world I thought I was doing. So I slap on my cheesy philosopher's grin. "I'm going through your purse." "You can't do that." "Sure I can." "You can't." I can't. A couple 2-year-olds. She's like, "Well, you can't." I'm like, "Well, why not?" "Because it's wrong." "Says who?" "You? Because you've been saying for the past 45 minutes that right and wrong is totally up to the individual. You say it's wrong to go through your purse. I say it's right. I'm going through your purse." "Yeah, but you can't." "Why?" "Because it's wrong." And I tried one more time. "Yeah, but why?" And she said, "Because everyone knows that." And her hand slapped over her mouth and she stopped talking. And I shoved it back, and then I ran out of there before I got stoned. Like the old-fashioned way. I didn't want that to happen. So, the fact of the matter is, if we're willing to be brave and gentle, yet firm. Some of us have had mentors in this room that are willing to give us a hug and put us in a headlock at the same time. You know what I'm talking about? But this is the meekness, the power under control, to not just say, I have to do everything to make the person comfortable. You have to do everything to make the person aware that there's something not right, deranged, not arranged in their thinking. I don't mean crazy when I say deranged. I mean literally the opposite of arranged. For time's sake, I'm just going to go through these fast. Facts are tricky things, right? Truth claims must either be true or false. You see, no matter what is said about, well, let's speak my truth, or I'm going to speak the truth that I want to speak, whatever it may be, or I'm going to adopt this particular ideology or this particular story, the laws of logic are still in effect. They don't go away, and they are a great friend to Christianity and the mission of the church. They're our friend. And by the way, if someone is trying to say, well, they don't apply to me, the only way you can argue around the laws of logic is to actually use them. It's glorious. It's wonderful. And the objective nature of the laws of logic is self-evident. And so even making a statement like there is no such thing as objective truth. I had a student at Marywood one time after class said, hey, I just had a professor before your class, Andy, that told us there is no such thing as objective truth. And I know this guy. And I said, well, wait a minute. Really? Because I understand that 19-year-olds have selective hearing. I get that. So do I. I mean, who doesn't? Well, you said pick up all my stuff? Because I thought it was like just some of my stuff. So I know that they have selective hearing, just like I do. And so I asked some investigative questions, and I found out, no, she believes it. That's what she heard. So I said, well, let's write that on the board. And I said, what kind of statement is that? She said, that's an objective truth claim. And what happens if you make an objective truth claim like that? She said, it's necessarily false. Right. Oh. And by the way, this student, after one class, I didn't realize it when I began talking to her. She's from the Lehigh Valley, went to a Bible-believing church, grew up in youth group, went to camps that I had spoken at, just never at the same time that I was there. And after this one class, she told me, and this was in the fall semester, I was ready to give it all up. One class. The church must retake the ground of intellectual integrity. We have to. We must. That means being willing to say things that are disagreeable for the purpose of mercy. It is not loving, it is not merciful to say, hey, Athenians, you're really awesome because you're super religious. Well, see ya. Not good. I do not have time to go through all this. But if you want to read about truth in action, may I suggest 1 John 2. Fascinating portion of Scripture. Ethics fits into this. If all ideas are equal and valid, we are stuck with Star Wars theology. Now, I consider myself a Star Wars fanboy, even though I hate most of the movies. It's really a paradox. I haven't quite figured it out yet. But I'm a fanboy. I don't get it. But I don't want to live in a Star Wars theology, because Star Wars theology tells us that good and evil exist side by side. My young Padawans, what is the goal of the entire Star Wars saga in the Force? Is it good triumphing over evil? Balance. Very good Stoics they are, with a wee bit of Eastern mysticism sprinkled in just for spice. But they're basically Stoics, and they're saying balance because good and evil exist side by side. I do not want to live in a reality where evil is a metaphysical necessity. Because if that's the case, good is dependent on evil. As opposed to Lord of the Rings theology, which happens to agree with the Bible and Augustine of Hippo, just saying, which actually demonstrates that all evil things were at one time good. There is no such thing as pure evil. It doesn't exist side by side with good. All evil things are mere deprivations of good things. The only way to have a rotten apple is to have a whole apple. The only way to have a broken leg is to first have a whole leg. And when the break heals, is the break still there? It's gone. Evil needs a host. It's a parasite. But if all ideas are equal and valid, then how do you have any categories truly of right and wrong to begin with? It's really quite scary. One more example here. This handsome fellow is John Cage. John Cage was a composer. Has anybody ever heard of this guy? A few of you? Are you a fan? Oh, good. Okay. So John Cage, because I'm really going to step in it hard. John Cage wrote symphonies, and he began to say, you know what, the universe is totally random. So in asking a fundamental worldview question, what is the makeup of external reality? Is it cosmos or chaos, orderly or disorderly? He'd say there is no order. We can have no order and figure out no order from the universe. It's total chaos. So he's the musical equivalent of the artist Pollock, right? So it's just thrown everywhere. So the guy actually designed a machine, just think about that for a second, to randomly flip coins, and these randomly, however the coins randomly flipped would become a musical notation. Now, I don't have a way to play this for you, but let me just suggest that it sounds like a herd of cats that have been given methamphetamine and set loose on a piano. That's kind of what it sounds like. There's no time, there's no melody, there's no harmony. I read that there were symphony musicians who would walk away and just quit because they refused to play it. Well, Cage made a name for himself doing this, but in 1954 he moved to Rockland County, New York, which some consider upstate. It's not, by the way, because I'm from upstate New York. I mean, for Pete's sake. Poughkeepsie isn't upstate either, I'm just saying. But he moved to Rockland County in 1954 and he began to study mycology. That's shrooms. He began to walk around his wooded cottage estate, and he found these beautifully colored fungi growing all over the place. And he had a thought. He said, "Boy, I bet some of those would be good in a salad. But I maybe should know which ones I'm supposed to eat." And John Cage actually became an amateur expert, if you will, in mycology, built this wonderful library for himself in the study of mushrooms. And he said this: "I became aware that if I approached mushrooms in the spirit of my chance operations, I would die shortly. So I decided that I would not approach them in this way." Good job, John. All it takes, and you don't need to be snarky like I am. I'm being snarky because I'm trying to just have you smile as you have to sit there and listen to me. But I'm dead serious. If you're willing just to do a little bit of thinking, studying, processing, asking God for wisdom, you may be able to help that young or older person in your life that is convinced in sola tolerantia. But I'm telling you, if you can just figure out a way to have a conversation with them about where that would lead, because I'm telling you, not a person on the planet would dare to live like that consistently. There is no way. Because eventually the comparison will turn into a contrast. And it could mean the difference between life and death. All right, faith is private and personal. Sola secreto fidem. What we have in this regard, and I'm gonna really speed this up so that we get a break, and so my friend Josh has plenty of time. Here's what it means. Belief is illogical at its core. The idea that belief is illogical, and that doesn't mean that you're crazy if you believe, but it's the idea that if you have a realm of belief, and every person on the planet does, every person on the planet is a believer. I did not say every person on the planet is a Christian, but every person on the planet is a believer. They all believe something. What about somebody who says they don't believe? It's still a belief system. It's just a negative. But the idea to believe in something that is outside the physical universe or something that doesn't have physical properties must be itself illogical, and you're supposed to just accept that. This is what the person that I got that illustration from, you perhaps saw in that quote, Francis Schaeffer calls the upper story and lower story, or the fact-value split, where most people, again, their daytime talk shows, you can watch this being played out every day, right now, where they talk about things that are fact, that are in the realm of empirical sciences, but anything that isn't physical is in the realm of value. It can't really have a fact, because it's just what you believe. For my children, up until this year, my son is going to a small Christian school in the area now. My daughter's still in public school. They came home not all that many years ago with a piece of paper from the Common Core curriculum, and they showed it to me. And it was a little shocking. Now, everybody likes to rip on Common Core for math, and it's well-deserved. A number model? What does that mean? I don't even know. Can't we just memorize like multiplication tables? Like, I don't know. So they bring this thing home, and they're showing me in the Common Core definition of the difference between fact and belief. And they say a fact is an idea that can be proven to be true. This is straight from Common Core. Whereas an opinion is something like what you believe and cannot be proven to be true. So my kids are like, well, frankly, they're my students sometimes. They're like, Dad, I don't think this sounds quite right. I said, yeah, let's talk about that. So, is slavery wrong? My kids are like, are you for real, Dad? I'm like, just answer the question. I'm not trying to trick you. Is slavery wrong? They're like, yeah, prove it. Or as I talk to my students sometimes, because they will say to me, well, you're just illogical in your belief of anti-God, or in your belief of God, Andy, because you can't prove it. And I'll say to them, well, do you love your mother? Now this is eventually going to come back to bite me. But until it does, I'm going to use it until it works. And then I'll have a wonderful horror story to share with you later on. But I'll say, yeah, do you love your mother? And every time I've asked a student that, the answer is yes. Prove it. Can't prove it. Is there evidence? Of course there's evidence. Or a militant autonomy in an area where feelings always trump facts. Do you know how hard it is to get a student to not lead a discussion in answering a question with, well, I just feel like I don't care. Tell me what you think. Now, of course, I do care about their feelings, but not in that way. Because the facts, feelings advisory, facts don't care. We could talk about all kinds of belief thinkers and how we got here, but here are some. And I want to compare and contrast the first two. Soren Kierkegaard and Friedrich Nietzsche. Soren Kierkegaard is considered the father of existentialism, and I'm not sure that he would be happy with that title. Soren Kierkegaard was a guy who was training for Lutheran ministry, wanted to be a pastor, and decided no, he didn't want to do that. He wanted to be a writer and dedicate his life to writing and teaching and thinking. But he was asking a question: how is it that I can be authentic? How can I be an authentic person when I know there is a holy God? Friedrich Nietzsche, one of those atheists that Christians love to hate and aren't really always sure why, was asking the same basic question, but from the radical opposite side of the coin. How can I be an authentic person when I know there is no God? And then moving up in time, several years to the early 20th century, you have guys like Albert Camus. Very famous for the myth of Sisyphus that he wrote, pushing the rock up the hill constantly, and for novels that he wrote, like The Plague. If you're looking for something interesting to read during these days, just saying, about the plague, or The Stranger, about a man that kills an Arab national just because he can. And makes everything in this line of thought that doesn't just begin with Kierkegaard, but for our purposes can, and moves up even into the 20th century and is with us today. It takes the idea of faith and it makes it so privatized that there's nothing that you can ask outside of it because it's totally up to you. Now, Kierkegaard didn't believe that, but he gets hammered with that some. But Nietzsche certainly did, and Camus did as well. And I just love this graphic so much I wanted to show you, because I have a seminar where we talk about the whole thing. Let me give you a contemporary example of this private faith thing. If I fear going into my spouse's purse, if that's my number one fear as a married person, the second one is trying to select a movie that we're both going to like. That's just, and do you remember in the ancient days when we had to go, it was so pedestrian, so plebeian, we had to go to Redbox. Do you remember that? Actually get the physical DVD or Blu-ray and bring it home as opposed to just streaming it. Oh, I know. It was so like troglodytes trying to watch a movie. So about 5 years ago, I was tasked with going to Redbox and finding a film we're both going to like, and I'm anxious. I'm sweating bullets. And I found this, Everest. Came out in 2015, and this is interesting to me. It's an adventure story, mountain climbing story, and I think, well, there's strong men climbing mountains. If nothing else, my wife will at least appreciate that. So I'm going to get it. Based on a true story. And I had no idea how much I was going to get into this movie, but it tells the story of the 1997, I believe, climbing expedition on Mount Everest, and there's a short 4 to 6 week window if you want to summit Everest. I mean, because who wouldn't? If you're going to summit Everest, it's a short 4 to 6 window in May, late April and May. And in 1997, 8 people died in one particular expedition because a blizzard just came up the mountain they weren't expecting, and people got trapped. And up until 2016, there was a terrible earthquake in Nepal during the climbing season, and 21 climbers died. But prior to that, this was the largest single loss of life that Mount Everest expeditions had ever seen. And it tells a story now in the movie Everest. And the movie is based in part on a book by John Krakauer called Into Thin Air. John Krakauer is a character in the movie. John Krakauer is a guy who works for Outside Magazine. He's a freelance journalist for Outside Magazine. Outside Magazine is kind of this high-end, bougie, outdoorsy thing, and so the kind of people that would go climb Everest are the people that read Outside. And so in the book, Krakauer says that all these climbing expeditions were commercial companies were trying to get him to go with them and write good press about climbing Mount Everest because they charge upwards of $100,000 to climb Everest. And he talks about running into one of these leaders of one of these expeditions, a guy named John Fisher, played by Jake Gyllenhaal in the movie. And they ran into one another at a social event in the Northwest in Seattle somewhere where many of these guys gathered. And Scott Fisher, his expedition company is called Mountain Madness, is doing everything he can to get John Krakauer to go with him to summit Everest. And Krakauer said that, I told Fisher, I haven't been climbing in many years, although I have expertise and proficiency, but I've never been above 20,000 feet. Base camp to summit Everest is something like 19,000 feet. I've never climbed with supplemental oxygen, and you need it if you're going to climb Mount Everest. You cannot breathe up there. I've never been that high up. I don't know that my body could even take it. I just don't know that I have the skill to go. And he said in the book, John Krakauer said that Scott Fisher's response was, it's not the altitude, it's your attitude, bro. Scott Fisher's body is on Mount Everest today. You could go see it if you like. You see, John Krakauer knew that, if attempting to climb Mount Everest with a bad attitude is probably a bad idea. You need a little bit of mental toughness in order to do that. But he also knew that his attitude had nothing to do with the effects of how his lungs are going to fill up with fluid at that radical altitude. You cannot live at that altitude. It's impossible. Or his cranium would fill up with fluid. Not to mention hypothermia, frostbite, or the fact that your body can't even process calories at that altitude. You have to go up a little chunky if you're going to climb Everest. He knew all of that. He knew his attitude was not going to change the reality. From the Screwtape Letters, this idea of a radical autonomy, Screwtape writing to Wormwood, and all the time the joke is that the word mine, in its fully possessive sense, cannot be uttered by a human being about anything. Think about it. We talk about it all the time. My car, my Bible study, my understanding of the Bible, my definition of truth, my interpretation, my church, my pastor, my deacons, my pew. We own none of it. In the long run, either our Father, and he means Satan, or the enemy, God, will say, mine of each thing that exists, especially of each man. They will not find out in the end, never fear, to who their time, they will find out in the end, to who their time, their souls, and their bodies really belong. Certainly not to them, whatever happens. At the present, the enemy says mine of everything on the pedantic, legalistic ground that he made it. Our Father hopes in the end to say mine of all things on the more realistic and dynamic ground of conquest. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. And I'm going to blaze through this, and I'm sorry, we're not going to get to the other things that I wanted to talk about. Experience is the truth teller, or sola experientia. And again, the full definition is knowledge, if available at all, only comes through one of two areas: existential experience or empirical experiment. So the existential experience, if I can really just be in there in the moment, as you would understand, somebody might say, if I just had a real sense of God's presence, then I would believe. If he could just fill in the blank, whatever they want to see, where they could have a real personal experience, then it would change everything. Now, is having a conversion an experience? Yes. Is realizing Jesus is God, confessing your sins, and asking him to rescue you, is that an actual experience? Yes. But you don't come to believe it's true because of the experience. You have the experience because you believe it is true. And I'm sure I don't need to go on and explain how experience, is experience a teacher? Is experience a viable way of knowing something? Yes. But she is heartless. She is cold. She is merciless. You don't get a second chance. You know, when I was a pastor here in town, I tried to teach the whole counsel of God, and for many years we didn't have children in our home. And then, I'd occasionally teach about rearing children, and there would always be somebody in my church, how dare you want to talk about raising children and you don't have any? Well, it's not like I claimed I was an expert or something. I'm telling you what the Bible says. Can I not do that? But also because I was a minister here in town, I did a lot of funerals. Most of them for people younger than me who died horrible deaths. And do you know, not once after a funeral, no one ever came up to me and said, how dare you tell us anything? You've never experienced death. Never once. They assumed I knew what I was talking about. How could I possibly know? Or the other side, and I'm hearing a lot of this in media right now, well, we're going to be people of science. Well, I like science too. Every time I get a upper respiratory infection. Can we still get regular sick anymore, or is it all just COVID? But if you get simple sick, I can just drive down the road here, I go to CVS and I go in and I get a simple antibiotic. Yay, science! Probably saved my life and yours more than once. And so is science an empirical experiment? Is that a way of knowing something? Of course it is. But here's what you don't have, ladies and gentlemen. Experience or experiment, neither one of them have inherently built into them an explanation. Because we're all basically having the same experience this morning. We could have, 50 different explanations as to what's going on, but what is really happening here? Here's just a couple quick things that I think we could think about to help us engage in this area, right? So we need to check our own thinking in these areas, and if there's a derangement, ask God to help you get it arranged. We need to think about helping our young people, our students, whether they be high school or college students. We need to have these sanctuary moments where they can come in and ask questions. And we need to temper training with teaching, because we have become so pragmatic in our view of ministry that it's all about what we do, and we seem to forget it's also about what we should know. If I had time to walk through that 1 John 2 passage, you'd see how John uses the word know, K-N-O-W, a lot. This is how you know. They go together. Jesus of Nazareth perfectly bridged that divide between the is and the does. Perfectly. There's no dichotomy. There's no dualism. It's both and. And just say, okay, we're going to answer the questions, and in mercy, we're going to tell you the truth. All right? God bless you. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope I gave my friend enough time so that we can have a break before he comes up to speak. God bless you.